In the beginning, truth was never spoken. It was whispered in stone, painted in fire, and sung in stars. There is a realm older than memory, deeper than scripture, and more sacred than any dogma, a realm where myth is not fiction, but cipher, where gods were not worshipped, but remembered. And in that realm, hidden beneath the sands of time, and behind the polished mirrors of modernity, lies the forgotten language of the soul. Ars Occulta, the secret art. Let us begin. At the threshold, not with an answer, but with a riddle. Why do all myths, from the caves of Altamir to the papyrus scrolls of Thoth, from the Norse sagas to the Vedic hymns, speak in riddles of gods descending from the stars, of floods washing away forgotten empires, of fire stolen from heaven and serpents coiled around sacred trees? Is it coincidence that every ancient tale, from every forgotten corner of the earth, echoes the same mythic geometry? Or is it memory, fractured and disguised, of a truth too immense to face directly? The answer lies in myth as machinery, not metaphor, but encoded transmission, passed from age to age by initiates, bards, and builders of temples. Myth was never meant for the masses. It was the lantern for those who wandered the labyrinth of existence, seeking the center. In ancient tongues, the word mythos did not mean fantasy. It meant that which speaks through silence. Take Prometheus, the titan who defied the gods to bring fire, wisdom, to humankind. He is no mere fable, but the archetype of the light bringer, the forbidden initiator whose punishment echoes the trials of all who dared awaken the sleeping. His liver is devoured daily, not as punishment for theft, but as a symbol of endless sacrifice for knowledge unearned. Prometheus is mirrored in Lucifer, in Enki, in Quetzalcoatl, in every god or spirit who dared cross the boundary of heaven and bear the spark. Behind the fire is a code. The fire is gnosis, the flame of knowing. Or consider the great deluge, the flood myth found in Sumer, in Egypt, in Greece, in China, in Mesoamerica. Always a cataclysm, always a purging. But why? What is this water that comes to wash the earth? The ancients did not record weather. They recorded cosmic resets, great purifications when the axis of the world shifted, when stars fell from their courses, when lost civilizations vanish into the sea, not just physically, but esoterically. Atlantis, Mu, Zp Tepi, not names of places, names of states of being, of human consciousness before the fall. The flood is symbolic of time's cleansing, the descent from divine mind to material bondage. And so we begin to see, myth is not just old, it is eternal. It is encoded memory of pre-human knowledge, the celestial inheritance encrypted in symbol. But who encoded it? Here we touch the first veil. In the deserts of Egypt, the priests of Thoth whispered of the Shensuhor, the followers of Horus, bearers of sacred knowledge from a world before ours. In India, the rishis spoke in hymns of cycles upon cycles, yugas long forgotten. In Mesoamerica, the watchers, the feathered serpents, descended from the sky to awaken man to mathematics, time, and stars. Across all these accounts, a single archetype emerges: the initiator, the bringer of light, the wanderer between worlds. This figure returns again and again in myth, always bearing the same message: you are not what you think you are. They were the builders of sacred architecture, the creators of celestial calendars, the custodians of divine geometry, and they left us clues. But the language of these clues is not English or Sumerian. It is the language of symbol, of ritual, of archetype. They knew that to preserve truth, it must be hidden, not in secrecy, but in sacred concealment, what the Hermetists called occultum veritas, the hidden truth. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the megaliths, they are not tombs. They are temples of memory, maps of the heavens cast into stone, harmonics encoded in angle, latitude, and proportion, stone codices, each block humming with meaning. And thus, the seeker begins to see what the world forgets, that history is not linear, but spiral, that truth is not told, but remembered. and that myths are not dead stories. They are living portals, doors to the past that still whisper. If one listens with the ears of the soul, we stand at the outer gate. The myths have spoken not to entertain, but to initiate. Behind each symbol lies a chamber. Behind each god, a principle. Behind each tale, a key. The journey into the Ars Occulta begins not with belief, but with seeing a new kind of vision, one that pierces through allegory into essence. And now, we descend further toward the hidden architects, the forgotten orders, and the sacred conspiracies written not in ink, but in stars. Not all who disappear are lost. Some retreat into shadow, guarding fires that must never die. As we pass the threshold of myth into the deeper chambers of the unseen, we begin to feel the silent presence of hidden hands, those who guarded the arcane, who veiled truth in allegory, who preserved memory not in books, but in brotherhoods, temples, rituals. The flame of ancient wisdom passed not through open proclamation, but through rites of initiation, through oaths whispered beneath moonlight. Under stars that remember when the earth was still young, who were these keepers of the flame? They wore many names, some forgotten, others whispered in forbidden texts. The Adepti of the White Brotherhood, the Yazidi guardians of Melektos, the Magi of Chaldea, the Nagas of Bard, the Mistai of Eleusis, the Therapeuti of Alexandria, the Druids of Albion, the Orphic inheritors, the Knights of the Grail, and later, in veiled legacy, the Rosicrucians, Templars, Freemasons, Martinists, and Hermetic orders of the Renaissance. Their names changed, but their task remained unchanged: to preserve the Ars Occulta, the secret knowledge of the stars, the soul, and the sacred code that binds all life. You will not find them in conventional history, for history was rewritten by conquerors, by churches, by kings who feared what these orders held: the knowledge that divinity resides not in thrones or temples, but within man himself. And so, the keepers went underground, quite literally into catacombs, mountain sanctuaries, desert crypts, inner sanctums carved in forgotten stone. But what were they keeping? It was not gold, nor weapons. It was memory, maps, keys, truths encoded in ciphers, symbols, and sacred geometries. A language passed from master to initiate, never to be spoken aloud, only to be lived, experienced, embodied. Knowledge that could bend time, lift the veil between realms, align the soul with the cosmos. These orders did not see history as chronology. They saw it as a cycle of descent and return, a spiral of forgetting and remembering. They called it by many names: the Great Wheel, the Platonic Year, the Aeonic Current. Each age, they said, would fall deeper into matter, into shadow, until the lowest point, the Nigredo, the Black Sun, from which a new light would rise. Their rituals reenacted this cosmic drama. The initiate would symbolically die and be reborn. In darkness, blindfolded, they were led through chambers reflecting the stages of the soul's descent into matter. Then, through trial, silence, and revelation, they would ascend toward the inner sun, the lost God within. This was not mere theater. It was alchemical transformation, living mythology. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a syncretic being, both Thoth and Mercury, taught the core of their belief: that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. To accomplish the miracle of the one thing, to the uninitiated, this was gibberish. To the adept, it was the master key: as above, so below, the mirror between cosmos and soul, a code that reveals how stars move like atoms, how temples reflect constellations, how myths mirror psyche. It was the guiding principle of the Ars Occulta, the thread running through all the orders, all the teachings. And so these brotherhoods, sisterhoods, these initiatic lines, endured the tides of empire, of inquisition, of ignorance. They encoded their truths in cathedrals and labyrinths, in tarot decks and illuminated grimoires, Every symbol was a seed waiting for the eye that could see. Take the cathedrals of Europe, Notre Dame, Chartres, Rosslyn. They are not merely Christian structures. They are books in stone, built on ancient PowerPoints, aligned with star paths, and coated with Kabbalistic, alchemical, and pagan symbols. Every arch, every rose window, every gargoyle and pillar is a glyph in a silent language for those with the inner lexicon to read. Even the Holy Grail, endlessly sought in legend, is no chalice. It is the bloodline of knowledge, the womb of gnosis, the inner vessel capable of holding the divine spark. To seek the Grail was not to find an object, it was to reclaim a state of being, a lost frequency. But why hide all of this? Because knowledge is power, and power in unworthy hands becomes corruption. The orders understood that truth, once commodified, becomes dogma. That sacred symbols, once profaned, become chains. So they concealed it not from cruelty, but from compassion. Only those willing to die to their illusions could inherit the truth. Yet not all kept the flame with purity. Some orders fell, some twisted the teachings, sought power over others rather than power within, and sorrows shadow orders, false initiates, black lodges, those who turned sacred knowledge into control, inversion, domination. Here lies the paradox of all sacred secrecy. What guards the light can also become the deepest shadow. And so the seeker must discern. In the next chamber of this sacred journey, we will descend further into the forbidden texts, the sealed manuscripts, the books that survived flames and kings and time itself. And we shall ask, what truths were banished into the margins of history? Truth was never destroyed. It was hidden in ink that bleeds only for the awakened eye. Beyond the orders and their sacred chambers lies another dimension of concealment, not in stone or ritual, but in parchment. Here, in the flickering half-light of candlelit crypts and desert monastic caves, the books that history was forbidden to remember still whisper, not to all, only to those who know how to listen, not with the ears, but with the soul. These are the forbidden texts, cast out by emperors, purged by popes, burned in libraries lit with sacred flames, and yet, somehow, they endured, torn, scattered, translated in shadows, hidden beneath floorboards, smuggled in ciphers, embedded within the footnotes of accepted gospels, the scrolls of the awakened, the pages of the damned, the gospels that dared to speak of a different Genesis. Our descent begins in the shattered sands of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, where in 1945, buried in a sealed jar like a tomb, a cache of manuscripts emerged, not new writings, but ancient echoes. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the secret book of John, and more, Gnostic scrolls untouched by the orthodoxy, and touched by the sword of Constantine, and touched by the councils that rewrote the map of the divine. These texts speak in a voice alien to the modern religious ear. They speak not of sin, but of sleep, not of salvation from without, but of awakening from within. In the Gospel of Thomas, Christ does not demand worship, he challenges memory. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. A riddle, a mirror, a spell. The Christ of the Gnostics is not a redeemer nailed to wood, but a spark igniting forgotten flame. He is Prometheus in another robe, Hermes with another tongue. He speaks of Ians, of Sophia, of the Archons, not devils, but cosmic jailers, rulers of the sensory world who obscure the true light. A cosmogony where creation was not divine perfection, but a fractured echo, a divine accident, and the world. We walk a maze, not a temple, but a test. Here we see the central Gnostic heresy, that the true God is not the God of this world, and that the soul must awaken through gnosis, through remembrance, through inner alchemy, not faith or obedience. The Church could not permit this, for Gnostic teachings rendered temples obsolete, rendered priests obsolete, rendered power obsolete, and so they became heresy, a word that once meant to choose. but now meant to burn. But Gnosticism was not alone. Other books drift in the shadows, the Pistis Sophia dictating initiatory cosmology, the Zohar luminous with Kabbalistic architecture of soul and cosmos, the Corpus Hermeticum attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, laying the framework of Hermetic philosophy, which once illuminated Alexandria before Rome extinguished its flame. Hermeticism taught that the universe is mind, that thought and form are one, that spirit descends into matter and must rise again through transmutation. These teachings would later ignite the minds of alchemists, artists, and magicians from Paracelsus to Newton, from Bruno to Blake. In the Asclepius, Hermes whines, "There will come a time when men will forget the sacred, when temples will lie in ruins, and the gods will depart from the earth, but one day they shall return," a prophecy or a memory repeating itself. And what of the Book of Enoch, cast out from the biblical canon, yet cherished in the highlands of Ethiopia? In its verses, angels descend to earth, not as messengers, but as watchers interbreeding with mortals, teaching forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, astronomy, enchantments. And for this, they are cast into the pit. The implication is staggering, that divine rebellion births wisdom, and that humanity's light is inherited from those who dared defy the heavens. In these texts, truth becomes paradox. The serpent becomes the liberator, the garden becomes a prison, the fall becomes the awakening. These are not contradictions, but esoteric inversions, truths encoded in paradox. For only those ready to question the surface could pierce the symbol. For every forbidden book, there is a guardian. And so we meet the tzaddikim, the hidden righteous ones of Kabbalah, the guardians of the threshold in Rosicrucian teachings, the manuscript keepers of Tibet, the book people of the Tuareg, all preserve fragments of a larger cosmic library, a living archive whose shelves exist in dream, trance, and vision as much as in matter. Some believe this archive has names: the Akashic Records, the Hall of Amenti, the Chronicles of Thoth, where every vibration, every thought, every symbol ever spoken or imagined is stored in the ether, awaiting the soul attuned to retrieve them. And so, the seeker must ask, what is the page? What is the book? The true text is not ink nor scroll. The true page is the self, the soul is the manuscript. And every sacred book is but a mirror reflecting the inner scripture we came here to remember. The crypt is not beneath us, it is within. Now, as the ink begins to shimmer and vanish, we feel the call of the next chamber, the alchemist's sanctum, where matter is transmuted, symbols are breathed alive, and time itself begins to melt. A place where gold is not a metal, but a soul refined in fire. The gold they spoke of was never in the ground. It was always inside the seeker, waiting to be born from ash. As we pass beyond the crypt of lost texts, deeper into the spiral path, the stone beneath our feet begins to warm. The air thickens with an invisible flame. This is not a place of scripture, but of transformation, where theory becomes fire and symbol becomes soul in flux. We have entered the sanctum of alchemy, the hidden forge of the mystics, chemists, and sages who labored not for gold, but for something far more dangerous: transfiguration of the human being. To the untrained eye, alchemy is folly, base metals, ancient furnaces, cryptic codes of dragons and suns, but to the initiate, it is the sacred science, the living air of Hermetic philosophy. The art royal, the great work, and like all sacred arts, it was encoded in paradox. The prima materia, the first substance, was said to be everywhere and nowhere, vile, base, rejected by all. Yet it contained within it the divine spark, the seed of perfection. It was called the dragon, black sun, the shadow, the chaos before the cosmos. The alchemists did not conquer it. They befriended it, descended into it, allowed it to consume their former self. For true alchemy was never about turning lead into gold. It was about turning the lead of the self, the weight of unconsciousness, fear ignorance into spiritual gold awareness, gnosis, divine union. Each stage of the great work mirrored not a chemical reaction, but a psychic metamorphosis. Nigredo, the blackening, the death of the ego, dissolution. The seeker is cast into darkness, fragmentation, sorrow. All that is false must decay. Albedo, the whitening, purification. Through the waters of reflection and lunar light, the soul begins to recall its original nature, the forgotten innocence beneath the mask. Citrinitas, the yellowing, the dawn of inner illumination. Solar awareness begins to rise. Insight becomes embodied. The masculine and feminine within begin to unite. Rubedo, the reddening, the sacred union, the soul reborn through fire. And fusion becomes the philosopher's stone, a being of balance, a microcosm of the cosmos. These were not metaphors, these were inner initiations, often guided by ritual, vision, and sacred experiment. Alchemists like Zosimos of Panopolis, Geber, Artephius, Basil Valentine, and Fulcanelli did not write for the masses. Their manuscripts are layered with allegory, often encrypted in symbols so dense that only an initiate of the inner fire could translate them. The mercury they spoke of was not the element, but the fluidity of consciousness, the ability to move between worlds, between spirit and matter. Sulfur was the fire of will, salt the body, the structure that contains and grounds the other two. Thus, the trinity of alchemy, mercury, sulfur, and salt, mirrored the hermetic triad, spirit, soul, and body. But the alchemists did not work alone. Their laboratories were not only rooms, but sacred spaces, temples in disguise aligned with astrological timing, filled with sacred geometry, infused with intention. The tools they used were consecrated. The processes were invocations. Their Athener, the secret furnace, was also the heart, the crucible of inner fire. Their retorts and alembics were models of the psyche, vessels in which experience was distilled. Their transmutations were not just chemical, but spiritual births. And within their art they wove the deepest hermetic axiom: solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine, die and be reborn, break apart and find the deeper union. Every sorrow, every disillusionment, every crisis becomes part of the alchemical process. Even the philosopher's stone, the legendary end of the work, is not an object, it is a state of being, a soul crystallized in divine balance, a consciousness so harmonized that it can affect the outer world, heal, transmute, awaken. This secret terrified rulers, empowered the heretics, and inspired generations of mystics, from the Rosicrucians to the adepts of the Golden Dawn, from Blake to Jung, who would later reveal alchemy was the sacred psychology of the soul. Its symbols bled into sacred art, cathedral windows, mandalas, and tarot decks, where the journey of the fool is the alchemist's path from ignorance to illumination. In all of this, a quiet truth emerges: the world itself is an alchemical vessel. History, catastrophe, love, loss, all are stages in the great work of collective transmutation. Humanity itself is undergoing a nigredo, and soon, perhaps, rubedo. Now the flame of the Athener flickers low. The soul, reborn in ash and light, turns its gaze to the temples of the old world, not as relics, but as living codes. Sacred structures built not to honor gods, but to mirror the cosmos. Before the word was spoken, it was carved, and what was carved was not merely structure, it was song-made stone. When the alchemist completes the inner work, the gaze turns outward, but now everything is different. The hills breathe, the rivers whisper, the very mountains seem etched with forgotten verses. And rising from the heart of the earth, where ley lines intersect, and stars once wept upon the soil, stand the temples, not places of worship, but machines of memory, constructed to awaken the sleeping gods within. This is the domain of sacred architecture, where geometry becomes invocation, and every angle is a prayer. Long before the modern eye learned to measure, The ancients knew how to resonate. They did not build with bricks, they built with proportions, ratios, alignments. They did not ask, will this last? They asked, will this speak? And what they built still speaks. The pyramids of Giza, mathematically coded to the golden ratio, the speed of light, the precessional cycle, and the very curvature of the earth are not tombs. They are harmonic resonators aligned with Orion, echoing myths of Osiris and the journey of the soul through the duat, the underworld, the inner world. Each chamber reflects a stage of initiation. Each stone a note in a cosmic chord. The great temples of Angkor Wat mirror the constellation of Draco. Their towers rise as symbolic Mount Meru, the axis mundi of Vedic cosmology, the point where heaven and earth entwine. Every causeway, every staircase, every pool is a modeline stone, leading the initiate through cycles of death and rebirth, echoing the turning of yugas at Teotihuacan. The Pyramid of the Sun is not just a monument. It pulses with solstitial fire. Beneath it, a hidden chamber flows with liquid mercury, the alchemical symbol of transformation and the underworld. Its avenue aligns with the Pleiades. Just as myths align the soul's origin with the stars, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, Sacsayhuaman, each bears an impossible precision and intelligence that defies the primitive narratives written by modern pens. These were not the works of barbarians. These were engineers of the invisible, aligning mass to meaning, structure to star path. But why? Because the ancients understood what we have forgotten. Matter is obedient to meaning, that when you build in accordance with the divine proportions, the Fibonacci spiral, the golden section, sacred ratios, the structure becomes a portal, an instrument that harmonizes with both the earth below and the stars above. This is sacred geometry, the language of creation itself, the circle, unity, eternity, the womb, the square earth, foundation, manifestation, the triangle, spirit ascent, the divine spark, the pentagram, the microcosm, man infused with spirit, the hexagon, the marriage of opposites, fire and water, above and below, the vesica piscis, earth, the portal through which the divine enters form. These are not just shapes, they are archetypal blueprints, echoed in cathedral floor plans, in the layout of temples, in the spiral of galaxies, in the proportions of the human body. Da Vinci knew this, so did Vitruvius, so did Inhotep. When a building is constructed according to these codes, it becomes more than shelter. It becomes a resonance chamber, a space where the veil thins, chant echoes deeper, thought becomes lighter, time bends. This is why sacred spaces have acoustics that defy engineering. Why pilgrims weep in certain chapels, even if they do not know why. Why entering certain temples feels like returning, as if your bones remember what your mind does not. And within these spaces, symbol reigns. The Eye of Horus, the Ouroboros, the Ankh, the Cross, the Modula, the Labyrinth, each is a living glyph, a doorway, not to belief, but to activation. A symbol is not a sign. It is a seed that grows in the soul when contemplated. Even the placement of temples mattered, not arbitrary, but aligned to celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, heliacal risings, at Abu Simbel, twice a year. The sun pierces the inner chamber to illuminate the statue of the god. In Chichen Itza, during equinox, the shadow of a serpent slithers down the temple steps, a dance of light and stone revealing the sacred drama of descent. These are not spectacles. These are coded rituals, played out in architecture. The builder priests, the architects of the divine, were initiates. They wove metaphysics into mortar, astronomy into architecture, myth into measurement, and their message, that Earth is not isolated. It is a reflection of the cosmos. That the sacred can be made visible, that truth can be lived, not just read but walked through, touched, heard, seen, felt. The temples are not dead, they sleep, waiting for the song to awaken them again, and perhaps, as the stars return to alignment, As ancient cycles renew, their song is returning. But even sacred stone fades, even architecture decays. Yet one temple never does: the body, the final temple, the inner sanctum. You seek temples of stone and forget the holiest altar is carried within your skin. As the path winds inward, from stars to symbols to sacred stone, the final temple begins to reveal itself. Not atop mountains nor buried in sand, but within you. The ancients spoke not only of gods above and spirits below, but of the divine housed in flesh, encoded in blood, breath, and bone. To them, the human being was not a passive vessel, but a living cosmogram, the embodied temple, through which all mysteries passed. This is the mysticism of form, the forgotten truth that the body is a map of the universe, a library of archetypes, a sacred architecture of soul stuff compressed into matter. The Egyptians called it the Ka, the physical body, the Ka, the vital force, the Ba, the soul bird, and the Ak, the transfigured light being, all aspects of one being, layered like veils. The yogs of India charted the chakras, wheels of luminous energy spinning along the spine, each a gate of transformation, each tied to an element, an archetype, a planetary frequency. In Hermetic tradition, the body is the microcosm, mirror of the macrocosm. The eyes reflect the sun and moon, the spine, the world tree, the heart, the sacred flame, the brain, the vault of heaven. Consider the spinal cord, the excess mundi within us. On it coils Kundalini, the serpent fire asleep at the base of the spine in the Muladhara, the root chakra. This serpent is no sin, it is Shakti, the divine feminine energy. The same energy the Greeks saw in Asclepius' staff, the caduceus, of Hermes to serpents entwined around a central staff, crowned by wings, symbol of medicine, of Mercury, of initiation into higher realms. In the Gnostic texts, the serpent is not a deceiver but an emissary of awakening, the spark of Sophia, whispering the forgotten truth that the God lies within. The eating of the fruit was not a fall, it was a signal of conscious evolution, a catalyzing moment, an ignition. Across mystical traditions, the body's energy centers are depicted in sacred geometry. The 7 chakras nearer the 7 planetary spheres. The 12 cranial nerves reflect the 12 zodiacal gates. The 33 vertebrae echo the 33 degrees of spiritual ascent, from base to crown, the ladder of Jacob, the pillar of initiation. Even in Christian mysticism, Christ is said to have died at age 33 at a place called Golgotha. The skull, a veiled reference to the soul's ascent from the lower instincts to the divine mind, the illumined skull, the pineal gateway. The pineal gland, long revered as the seat of the soul, is shaped like a pine cone, just as the ancients sculpted on the staffs of Osiris, on the papal tiara. In Sumerian reliefs where gods held pinnacones toward human foreheads, the pine cone is not decorative. It is the glyph of activation, of opening the inner eye, the eye of Horus, the Ajna chakra. This third eye, when awakened, sees not with form, but with essence. It pierces illusion. It is the gateway through which the divine looks out through the human, but not all serpents ascend, some coil, some bind, and this is the danger of forgetfulness, that the body left uninitiated becomes a prison instead of a temple. This is why rituals of dance, breath, fasting, chanting, and sacred union existed, to realign the body with the stars, to reawaken the divine mechanics encoded in the flesh. In the Eleusinian mysteries, initiates would undergo rites so profound that they emerged transformed, reborn, because the rite was not external, it triggered the inner temple. The same is said of the tantric traditions, where union is not lust but liberation, the merging of polarities to awaken the inner androgyny, the divine child within. For Baphomet, the horned androgynous figure misunderstood by the profane is not a demon. It is the complete human, male and female, light and shadow, rooted and winged, beast and God, in balance. In Baphomet, the words are written, solve, dissolve, and coagula, ray form. The same alchemical process now taking place within your bones. This is the great secret. The body is the philosopher's stone. It carries memory, ancestral codes, starline DNA. It has endured countless incarnations, burnings, bindings, dreams, and still it remains waiting for the inner alchemist to awaken and begin the work. All the symbols, all the myths, all the temples lead here to the realization that you are the myth. You are the temple. You are the key, but the story does not end here. It only deepens, for once the inner temple is activated, the veil begins to lift between realms. The seeker begins to sense portals, moments, visions, traces of a greater tapestry beyond the known world. The next chamber calls us into the mystical patterns of time, the sacred calendars, the cosmic clocks hidden in stone, myth, and memory. Time is not a straight road but a spiral staircase. Those who ascend it return again, but never to the same floor. We have touched stone, symbol, and self. Now we stand before the great turning, the vast, breathing rhythm behind all myth and mystery. Time not as chronology, but as a cosmic current, alive, intelligent, and sacred. The ancients did not watch time, they listened to it. For them, time was a living being, a wheel of return, a soul teacher who whispered through star movement, solstices, and equinoxes, through comets and eclipses, through tides of history that seemed to repeat not by accident, but by design. In this chamber, we begin to see time the way the gods do, not in hours and minutes, but in eons. In Hermetic cosmology, an eon is not merely an age, it is a spiritual phase, a vibratory field, governed by an archetypal principle. Each eon bears its own symbols, deities, and challenges. It is born, flourishes, declines, and dies only to seed the next. The ancient Hindus spoke of yugas, great ages that repeat in cyclical descent, Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali, golden, silver, bronze, and iron. In Satya, truth reigns. In Kali, the current age, darkness obscures light, and the soul forgets itself. But even Kali is sacred, for it is in the darkness that the seed of awakening stirs. The Mayan long count calendar tracks not centuries, but world epochs, over 5,125 years per cycle, encoding not just solar time, but galactic alignment, particularly the conjunction of the December solstice sun with the dark rift of the Milky Way, the womb of the galaxy. This is not mere astronomy, it is cosmic myth incarnate. The zodiac, far more than a personality chart, is an ancient clock of initiation. Each age, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, brings forth a new spiritual code. When the equinox sun rises in a different constellation, human consciousness shifts. In the age of Taurus, bulls were sacred, Apis, Minoan rites. In Aries, rams, Moses' sacrifice. In Pisces, fish, the Christ, the ichthys. And now, the wheel turns again. We enter Aquarius, the water bearer, symbol of the knowledge poured out, the awakening of the collective mind, the dissolution of boundaries. It is no accident that in this time veils are lifting, and ancient truths resurface. But these cycles are not external, they are mirrored within. Just as the year spirals through seasons, the soul cycles through phases: inception, ascension, trial, death, and return. Prophets, mystics, and initiates did not prophesy the future as fixed. They read the patterns, the symmetries, the celestial echoes repeating through the ages. And always, in times of deep shadow, there came a signal, a celestial event, a whisper in the myths, a symbol resurfacing. Take the great conjunction, the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, long seen as the harbinger of new orders. In 2020, it aligned in Aquarius, ending a 200-year cycle of Earth signs and beginning a new air cycle. This was no coincidence. It was a marking, a cosmic signature. The ancients left calendars carved in stone, not to mark festivals, but to chart transformation. The Dendera zodiac in Egypt, the Antikythera mechanism of Greece, the Nebraska disk in Germany, each a device for tracking the divine dance, not just of planets, but of consciousness itself. But beyond the planets lie deeper mysteries. In the Kabbalistic tree of life, the hidden Sapphira is not seen. It is remembered when the tree is ascended fully. It represents lost knowledge. The gap between cycles, the sacred void, between eons, it is not a space of terror, but of gestation where new truths are born. Many myths speak of golden ages buried in the past, Lemuria, Atlantis, Z.P. Tepe, the first time, but others speak of their return, that after the descent comes the rising, after the Nigredo, the Rubedo, after the Kali Yuga, the Satya dawn. And so time itself becomes a spiral of remembering, not linear decay. The Rosicrucians taught that history was a divine allegory, that each empire, each fall, each revelation was a chapter in a cosmic manuscript, and that those who could read the symbolic fabric of time could navigate its storms and locate the hidden portals, moments where the veil thins and one may cross into deeper truths. For these portals do not exist only in space, they exist in time, moments where prophecy, symbol, and soul converge, eclipses, equinoxes, celestial alignments, even personal initiations, the moment of crisis, heartbreak, or awakening, all are gateways into the eternal, and thus the initiate is not a victim of time, but a navigator of its depths. The sacred calendars were not made to control the masses, they were tools for the liberated soul to remember when to move, when to still, when to speak, when to listen. But there is one more turning yet. Beyond the patterns of time, beyond the vault of stars, there is a final secret, the one hidden in plain sight. The myth itself, the grand story. The tale repeated endlessly in different tongues, forms, and symbols, always pointing back to one eternal truth. In Part 8, we will complete this journey, unveiling the myth behind all myths, the God behind all names, and the revelation that unites all veils. In every story, the hero dies, but the secret is they are reborn with the name of the God written upon their bones. We have walked the labyrinth of lost civilizations, sacred symbols, alchemical fires, and the living temple of the body. We have turned the wheels of celestial time, followed the spiral stairs of eons, and watched the veil between worlds grow thin, and now in the final chamber. We arrive not at an ending, but at the beginning that has no beginning. This is the myth behind all myths. All sacred traditions speak of a primordial story, one told not with words, but with dreams, stars, shadows, and fire. It is the tale behind the tale of Osiris, of Dionysus, of Christ, of Inanna, of Odin, always the dying god, the descending goddess, the journey into the underworld, the descent into death, and the return bearing fire. Why does this pattern repeat? Why do all cultures remember the same myth in different masks? Because it is not a story about the gods, it is a story of you. The mythic archetype lives within every soul. It is the blueprint of awakening encoded in the collective psyche, what Jung called the collective unconscious, what the Gnostics called the pleroma, what the Hermetists called nous. The divine mind, the myth is not entertainment, it is initiation. In the deepest sense, mythology is not a description of the past, it is a prophecy of the soul's unfolding. Each god is an archetype, each archetype, a facet of the divine. Isis mourning the slain Osiris is the soul mourning the loss of its true self. Prometheus chained to the rock is the initiate bound by material illusion. Persephone's descent into Hades is the spirit entering the body, forgetting, then remembering. The Grail quest is the return to the womb of truth through suffering, madness, and divine encounter. These stories are not dead. They are echoing, still shaping your thoughts, dreams, fears, and desires. The real magic is this: once you see the pattern, you become the mythmaker. The story ceases to control you. You step outside the wheel and begin to turn it consciously. This is why secret societies, mystery schools, and spiritual lineages preserved. The myths not as dogma, but as keys to unlock inner chambers. When an initiate heard the story of the god slain and risen, they were hearing their own prophecy. The moment they realized this, the myth became alive, and their own journey became sacred. Even the shadowed myths hold light. The trickster Loki Set Eshu is not evil. He is the sacred chaos that disrupts the stagnant order, that forces the soul to grow. The dragon is not only the beast to be slain, but the guardian of wisdom, the keeper of the treasure, the symbol of raw primal energy that must be integrated, not destroyed. And then there is the shadow, the dark twin, the forgotten one, the unspoken self. Every myth holds it, the double, the betrayer, the secret curse. But the occult truth is this: the shadow is not the enemy. It is the uninitiated aspect of the soul, the part waiting to be named, seen, embraced, and alchemically fused with the light. That is the final task of the initiate, not to destroy the dragon, not to flee the underworld, but to enter it willingly, to reclaim the pieces of the self shattered across lifetimes, to emerge not pure, but whole. This is the secret the ancients wrote in veiled language, in temple alignments, in sacred rites, in encrypted manuscripts. They knew that the universe is not a machine, but a living mythic organism, and you are not separate from it. You are its dream, its mirror, its voice. When you awaken to this, you awaken to the real occult path, not knowledge for power, but knowledge as remembrance. You are the forgotten god walking through the ruins of your own temple. You are the scribe who burned your own book so only the worthy would remember. You are the myth that has not yet been written, the final verse of an eternal song. And so we close the book, not to end the journey, but to pass it into your hands. You are now the seeker, the alchemist, the initiate, the builder of the next temple. The stars remember, the stones remember, the soul remembers. Now, will you?